Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today a viewer request. We're going to work on an Ocean City reel, an older one. And quite honestly, some folks would be challenged on this setup here to even pick the Ocean City out. They all look so much the same back in the 60s and the 70s that it was hard to distinguish them on fishing boats and even on your store shelves. But three of the reels here almost look identical, and three different manufacturers. So this is the one that everybody would be most familiar with. This is the Penn. It's the Model 60 Long Beach, and I've seen a lot of them in the shop. This one is fairly less common. It's a J.A. Cokes. It was manufactured up in Bronson, Michigan, and you saw a lot of these in the 50s and the 60s as well. And then we have the Ocean City, and just a couple of quick stories on the Ocean City. We're going to take this apart. I'll show you how it's made up. That's what the viewer request was, how to service it. But so as I knew somebody, know somebody, that could never figure out the toggle on the free spool. No matter how hard they pushed or pulled or did whatever, similar to the Long Beach, they could never get the rod and reel into free spool until they got to the point where they wanted to wrench it with pliers or something, and I guess they decided a better part of wisdom would be to ask somebody how to do it, and it's real simple. It just pulls out the free spool. But I know that somebody real well because that somebody was me, and I was preteen at the time, I know, and somebody handed me a fishing pole on a boat and said, you can use this while I go get something to eat. And I could never figure out how to release it. So lesson learned from that. There was a lesson learned from that. And that lesson that I learned was don't wrench or torque anything on a fishing reel. If something isn't cooperating freely, try and figure it out or seek advice. And if anybody has questions on the reels that you're working on or fishing with that aren't working, please send me a question and I'll try and help you. The other thing I saw, which was kind of interesting, was somebody told me at one point in time that they never reset this manually. They always bang it with the handle. I find that kind of interesting too. I don't believe it was designed that way, but that's a trick they learned, and then they go ahead and do it. So let's get started on this reel, having our history lesson behind us. This reel is nice. It comes with the key wrench that enables you to take the handle screw off to get to the inner workings of the reel. So we're going to do that right now. You remove that key wrench with the screwdriver. It also has a little groove on there if your hands are strong enough, or if the screw isn't set tight enough. I guess you can work it off by hands. Speaking of hands, you'll notice I have a plastic glove on there, a latex glove. I like to keep the real contaminants off of my hands if possible. So setups are somewhat similar to those other reels that I showed you. We have the handle, and then we have the star drag and adjuster nut, and underneath that we'll have a ferrule. And what's happening with this reel, I can see already, is that the drags are shot. So I'm going to have to order drags, but I will show you how to make this work anyway, and what the pieces and parts are and how would you do that. So how do I know the drags are shot? Because this ferrule that's here should be extended past the opening, and it's not. It's flush with it, which means that you can't get any drag tension by pushing the star adjuster knob down. So that's the problem with this reel at the moment. I believe that the drags are still available on smoothdrag.com, but we'll go ahead and we'll show you how to take this apart, and we'll set it up for a drag service. So another interesting thing with the Ocean City reels is they had this little loop behind the reel. That's not the front side, that's the back side. So when you're casting, your thumb sits easier on that, and also using your thumb as a brake, you can press down on that in a more ergonomic, if that's today's word, ergonomic way, than if that was a straight bar. So if you're wondering why that bar is ever bent, and I've had some folks that have worked on the reels and put that in the front thinking that that loop enabled better casting. That's not the way it came from the factory, so I'm not quite sure if it ever did that or not, but I do know that I have seen that switched. I've also seen this wind up in the wrong place under servicing. As a matter of fact, this is the 112, and somebody's got that the wrong way as they went in to replace something inside that reel. All right, so we're just continuing, and like the pens, you want to make sure that the side screws are identified, because the lower side plate screws, the ones that go into the reel seat, are shorter than the cross post screws. So typically I lay them out on the table, as you know, and this is just an example here to show you that they are different. I'm just laying those two out, but I kind of know that. So Ocean City reels were not manufactured in Ocean City, Maryland. They were manufactured in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the same place as Penn. They started before Penn, and some of the employees from Ocean City kind of migrated over and worked for Penn over time. This is the example of the two screws at the varying lengths. This goes into the reel seat, that goes into the reel post. Okay, I think I got them all out. We'll pull this out now. You notice I didn't pull all the bridge screws out right away. This is what is different from a Penn reel. It's the internal setup on this. When you pull this out, that moves this lever. It's kind of on a fulcrum, and it moves this to pull this in to release the spool. It rides on two little centering pins. Those are controlled by the two screws up top. You do not need to remove those to service the reel. I'm going to take that off just to show you how these work. That little fulcrum effect there. We're going to start by taking the screw out of the jack. Then we can pull that jack up through those pins. You'll notice we have two screws up top, springs up top. Then we have the yoke and the spool gear. Those just lift off. And then we have the two springs on the side plate, and then we have the spool gear sitting inside that. So what we'll do here, we're going to set this up, as I said, for the drag. So let's show you how to service the upper and the lower all in one. For now, I'm just going to put these in the parts bin now that I've identified them for you. And I do use that tray. It enables me to find the pieces and parts as I take them off. These are set into grooves, and they're kind of hang on that, so I'm just going to leave them on the studs for now, but you could remove them if you like. And then all we have to do then is remove the bottom portion, and those are held on by two screws, as opposed to the Penn reels, which has a similar setup on the bridge. You can see the four screws, but those two hold into the bridge as well. In the Ocean City, they do not. So I'll only take the two bottom ones out. And you should be able to just push it through at that point, push the pinion gear through, or gear sleeve. And I cup my hands on that because you never know if anything is going to come out of there. It shouldn't, but in case it does, you'll have it. So on this one now, we have the dog, just like a Penn. We have the spring sitting inside the gear plate here. And take that out so we don't lose that spring. Just looking for a little punch. My pen. And that's why I cup my hand, because this thing gets loaded, it can shoot it off. I'll put those in here. I'm going to take the two screws out while I'm at it. And then we can see that we have a problem here because all of the drags are so compressed that they're no longer functional. So with that, we'll try and get these uncompressed here by taking this off. And right now, like the Penn reel, it has a little pin that holds the gear sleeve on, and that pin is proud, which is causing us, it might be hard to see, it's causing us to not be able to get that out. That's easy enough, you just tap that back in. I can get to my little hammer. There you go. Once you tap that in, you can free that from the tube, and then we're going to just push these out, and we'll see the effects of the drag system in here. So this appears to only have the one drag in it, but it's mashed down into the gear, and it's not cooperating in terms of coming out, but that's not unusual. We're going to replace it anyway, so this may be the one that has the cup like a brake gear, like an asbestos. It's going to come out in a big piece, I believe. If it comes out at all. So what you do in this case, if this is the single piece as opposed to the multi-piece, you go back and you do a conversion that gets the multi-piece set up for this, and that will restore the reel. Yeah, you can just see this is all crumbling. So yeah, so what we'll do when we go to order this now is we'll come back and we'll order the bigger pieces, and that will enable us to complete the service on this reel. So let me show you how to button this up, just so that if you have this reel apart, you know that this is no good. Just so that you know how to put it back together and I don't leave you hanging there. So we're going to pretend for a moment that we've put the new gears back in here, which we're going to order. Those will come as separates now, so there'll be 2 or 3 that'll stack with metal washers as intermediaries. And by the way, that's the same issue with the older Penn Senators. Sometimes you get the big wide one. If you do, then you got to replace that. We're going to clean this up a little bit because this is where the dog rides, and it's got all kinds of junk and contamination on there. So we want to make sure that that gets clear so that it's easier for that to work. And I'm just using a side of a screwdriver at the moment to clear that off. A little bit of steel wool to clean that off as well. You could use a chemical cleaner if you wanted to, if it was anything more than that. But I'll save the majority of this cleaning for the new drags. But we're going to pretend that we have the new drags in there now. We're going to load this back up, put the drags underneath. And then what we do is we reset the whole piece now. So the first part that you do is you take the bridge, just like you would with a pen, and you set this bridge kind of, that's upside down, and you set it at a tilt, so that you can work the dog and the screw in. Now, bridge screw. Looking for my dog. Looking for my spring. That's why we have the parts bucket. This is where you want to be careful because springs shoot. I think maybe that's the origin of the statement, "oh shoot," because they do. Just trying to get that set properly, which is there. Now we can swing this around like you would with a pen. Line up the side plate with the screw. And you can get that started there. And again, these only have the 2 plates, the 2 bottom screws in this one. So you don't have to work any kind of pattern in terms of torquing them down. I like to leave the one loose while I set the other, and then come back and tighten them both up, which is what we're doing here. Okay, we got that in. And the next part up then is, it's kind of a combination. It's a 3-step kind of play here. You want to clean your yoke. And again, if you find that you have something particularly nasty in there, you could use something like a metal cleaner. Here's a chrome polish, for example. Just put a little bit on there. Just a little bit of grit that helps polish it and keep the junk off of it. And the rest of that is wear. Same idea here. And again, this is with a little bit of steel wool. It's a 4-0 steel wool. I don't recommend anything more abrasive than that. And 4-0 is extra fine. The rest of that is wear there. And then, so a couple of different things, right? So there's 4 grooves on the outside of this. That's the outside that faces towards the body of the reel, and then smooth internals. And then it sits on this gear shaft, like such. And then the yoke comes over the top, like this. But we're going to put a little bit of blue grease on that first. I use a Penn Precision reel grease for that, but any manufacturer's grease will do. Maybe it's sacrilegious in this case that competitors across the city from one another in Philadelphia there have somebody using the grease from the other. There's a little tab on this. That tab belongs to the back. It's part of that fulcrum system. And then that just sits on top of the posts with the springs in them. You can press that down to get that properly seated. Next up then is the a little hold down for that. Oh, you got to put the 2 springs in. See, there's the value of that parts bucket. There's 2 springs that are the other side of this operation. And then we can take this over the springs, and there's 2 grooves in the side of these guideposts. So you want to make sure you slip it under there as such. And then once you have that, you can press down with your finger and you can set that screw. It becomes the screw for the hold down the jack. And that'll make this operational. And you want to tighten that down all the way, and then just test. Pull it in, pull it out, pull it in, pull it out. And you can see, hopefully on the camera, how that pulls this gear down and releases the spool for free spool. With that, I'm just going to take a couple of drops of oil. You can use anybody's oil. Here's a Penn Precision oil that I happen to pick up. I use a Real-X oil, which is an aftermarket. I like to just put a little bit on the sliding parts here. Right, and then we can button this reel back up. So now we're playing along here. We're assuming that we've had the drags fixed. We'll get those drags. We're going to go ahead and put the grease on the one side. I think those drags are available from smoothdrag.com. That's my first stop in terms of trying to find them. I'm just going to grab a paper towel at the moment, even though I'm going to have this open again later. Just clean off some of the accumulated oils and grease from that. Put a little bit on the spool shaft here. And I can put this back on the reel. Make sure that it gets seated properly. And we just put in the long screws in the side posts. We took a note of that earlier when we were pulling these out. And the short screws go in the reel seat. But again, this is more for demonstration purposes at this point in terms of how to put the reel back together, knowing that the drags still need to be replaced on that. But also it'll help me. This is going to sit until I get the replacement drags, which will take a little while. And there's no sense leaving parts in a basket and maybe forgetting how the reel goes back together in the interim, and then sitting there with the proverbial basket case. So I'll just put them all back there. That way I know that I have them when I go to reinstall them. And as you saw from the work effort earlier in terms of taking the reel apart, it's not that much, a couple of minutes to do it. And you know, it pays dividends in the end when you're not looking for pieces and parts on your workbench, or worst case, you can probably see on the back of my bench there I have 1 or 2 baskets that do have some open reels in them. I think most recently the one was that rear drag reel that we had there, the Abu, and you know, something can always happen, right? It can get knocked around. I could be searching for a hammer or something, maybe inadvertently hit it with my elbow or something, and then you're on the floor picking up pieces and you're never quite sure if you got them all. So I always say, if you got a reel that you're not going to service for a while, but you know it needs something, then go ahead and do it. All right, and you can see that the ferrule here is in the same position it was before. They have a retaining washer here, and the star drag goes back on. Little clue with this one, that one's spinning now. So if you want to stop the spinning, there's a little groove in this pinion gear sleeve. You can just stick the screwdriver into that. Pick a wider one that works better. Just stick the screwdriver into the groove. There's a slot there that'll enable you to hold the gear sleeve while you turn down the star adjusting nut. So you get to the point where it needs to be. Then up comes the handle. This is a handle's got a square to it. Handle nut. And then the best part of all, and what I give Ocean City a lot of credit for at the time, the wrench is right on the handle. So always a nice thing to not have trouble with the trying to find the wrench for it. How many times have we done that? We've done it with the we've got boxes we take, we hurry to get the reel fishing, and then the reel gets to the point where it breaks, and we go back and we try to find the darn box somewhere so we can find the handle tool. In this case, it's right there. So, and then what you do lastly is you just make sure that as you're doing this, you line the handle wrench up with that slot for the handle screw, like that. And then as you, well, we have no drag now, so it's not going to work, but that's the way it works. Okay, so that's the Ocean City 113. We're going to, like I said, we'll order the drags and we'll go put them back in near term, but hopefully if you have one of these, you've seen what's necessary to service that, how to take the reel apart, how to reset the reel, how to make it work again. So with that, I'm going to conclude the video. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. I try to respond to all. In the meantime, I wish you good fishing. Thank you.